In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove the vacuum pump off of your 2.5 liter without removing the transmission. So let's dive into it. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Jack, and on today's upload, we're going to be installing a vacuum pump on a 2.5 liter Volkswagen Jetta. So if you have one of these, grab a pen and paper, grab some popcorn, your favorite beverage. This one might take about 3 hours overall. It's not a hard job. There's a bunch of shit that's got to come off. Through the course of this video, we're going to go over torque specs, things to look out for as you're going, stuff that's going to break potentially, and things that you might want to consider along the way. All right, so the tools that you're going to need in this job are pretty straightforward and pretty easy. We're going to start over here on the right. You're gonna need flashlight, well, some sort of light. You're gonna need a torque bar, a pry bar, a screwdriver, a body panel tool if you have one, a couple different pliers, a couple different ratchets, just random extensions. You're gonna need a T25, a T30, a 12 millimeter, 10 millimeter. Didn't wanna lose it, I had it in my pocket. A 13 and a 12. Maybe, depending on if you like 1/4 inch or 3/8. That's your cup of tea, whatever you want. So something also that I want to take note of is I would recommend using a digital torque meter on something like this. We're getting down to 10 Newton meters, and these mechanical ones kind of just don't do it. Don't mind my bolt pile. Customer was missing a bolt for his battery tie down. More to come on that. But these ones just don't have a fine enough ratcheting mechanism to really get down to those small increments. Digital ones, however, like even this one you can get online. This one's from Harbor Freight. I've had it for years. Freaking amazing. I'll put a link in the description below for this one, not only for Harbor Freight, but for those guys out there who don't have one. There's a couple Amazon versions that are just like this. If otherwise, get yourself a nice 1/4 inch digital torque gauge. Anytime you're using torque bars, you want to stay in that middle third is what I like to be. Once you go below that or above that, you kind of you might need to question yourself on whether or not you should go up to the next torque bar. It's a rant of mine. It's something I'm very adamant about. When you need a torque spec, you want to make sure it's right. Anyway, this is what you're going to need. Through this video, I'm going to give you several tips and tricks along the way on how to do this vacuum pump, things to be considerate about, things that might break, and just general order of operations on how you should be taking this apart so that you don't have to take the transmission out while you're doing it. Typically, to do this job, this is a transmission out service. You actually have to separate the motor and the transmission from each other in order to get the vacuum pump out. Not something we want to do. So because this is an off the books type of repair, make sure you follow along. The procedures in this and the specs in this are directly from the Volkswagen manual on what they should be. Everything else is done based on, done this a couple times. I learned this trick a long time ago from the Humble Mechanic. I think he did a video on it probably like 7 or 8 years ago, 9 years ago. I learned this probably like 5 or 6 years ago. So it works really well. Never got around to doing a video on it. We got a 2.5 in. I figured, you know what? Great time to do it. Let's dive into vacuum pump on 2.5 liters. Now, this thing really isn't that bad to take off. There's 2 screws that are in each side. They're 2 T20s. They just go right in each side of there. You might have sensors that this one doesn't happen to have. Inlet air temp, I do believe, is what they put here. And then the MAF sensor is sometimes up here. This car doesn't have one for X reasons. Anyway, let's get this engine cover off here, and I'll walk you through it as we do it. Come on, don't fall. Boogers. There we go. This is a kid-friendly channel. Kid-friendly channel. I'm a complete and utter goofball. I was sitting here fiddling with it, not even thinking about it, and I looked up. I'm like, wait, there's nothing underneath of there. What am I doing? There we go. Now that our tube is loose, somebody's been in here and not put things back. Which kind of intrigues me on like, what else am I gonna find as we go? But next thing we gotta do is we gotta pop this cover off. We don't have any of the harnesses like some 2.5s do, but what we do gotta deal with is there's pedestals that stick underneath of here. There's one in each corner, and they got little grommets on top of them. And in order to get the cover off, you gotta pop those off of them grommets. Well, the catch is, as they get older, they dry up and they get tighter. And because of that, the covers are quite a bit harder to get off sometimes. They're gonna creak, they're gonna make noise. You might need to get something underneath of it to kind of give you better leverage so you don't like rip a corner off. Like this one is, I'm actually trying to pull on it. So we're gonna get something underneath of here to help us out. Not your typical tool to do the job. Just trying to get a little, oh, there we go. I can get a little leverage under this corner. Ah, I had the camera sitting right here, kind of probably a bad idea. There we go. Nice. All right, there we go. There is your 2.5 liter engine cover. Those grommets I was telling you about, that's those guys right there and there. You can lube these up. It'll make life a lot easier the next time you do it, take it apart. But now that you got this thing off, and let me show you what's underneath of it. So now, everything that is anything that's about this engine, it's like, oh look, there it is. You've got your intake manifold, your coil packs, your valve cover, your pancake valve, which is basically built into your valve cover, your vacuum pump down there. If you need to get to your ABS, engine cover's gotta come off. So, all right, so next thing we need to take care of is we need to get this band clamp off of here. Pliers work great, but sometimes we need a little bit extra. This one, fortunately, we can get to. All right. So there's a line down here on the side that we need to take care of after you get that clamp off. You want to be careful not to break this one. Kind of a weird little clamp. Didn't even get to do it. I just went to go grab it and I looked. I was like, oh look, somebody's already broken it. We'll take this tube off of there. And that tin. Now, I like to loosen both of them. We'll usually just go ahead, pop. If you got one of these, the terminals that are kind of being stingy, and even with a pry bar or like a screwdriver, they don't want to come loose. If you look down in here, and you can kind of just wiggle it. There you go. And all right, up and away. So there is a couple things that are gotta go on here. So there is a connector that's right down here. And then we need to go in and remove 3 10mm bolts. One of them's here, one of them's here, and one's down here. Our steering reservoir, you need to just pull up and pull it back. Get that out of the way. There's gonna be a line right down here that you need to take care of. Now, we got a couple options here. We can either A, pull the harness here and pop this tray out as 2 pieces, or we can just disconnect it. Being as the battery's disconnected, it's okay. We just need to make sure to not get anything in this connector. You kind of want to be careful with this. It's kind of somewhat fragile. There we go, there's that one. There's one of those harness connectors that we were talking about earlier. And just slide that guy right down in there. Boom. All right. Now we can take that out. Now those are out of the way, we can pull the harness out. And now we can pull our battery tray out. Cool. All right, now that we got the battery tray, we can really start to see the top of the transmission. We can see all the gunk and grime that's also leaking from this thing. So in order to get to this thing, you're supposed to take the transmission all apart. Down here, there's a couple things going on. First off, this whole mechanism, the selector, the cable, they're all gonna come off. We wanna index a couple of these specifically this bolt here and this one back here. Yeah, what else is there that's super important that we need to follow through with? We're not gonna remove this cable right here, the connector itself, there's no reason to do it. We're just gonna actually slide this entire contraption up and off of there. All right, so like I was saying earlier, we're just gonna go ahead, give this a little witness mark, index mark, yeah. There you go. And then I'm just gonna do one of those right there. You can kind of see it. There you go. All right, take 46. So the order of operations here, we need to take this shift selector arm off. You can use a body panel tool if you got one, or in a pinch, you can kind of use a pry bar. The trick here is that you want to roll this off as you go, slow and steady. So let's, all that is in there is a ball and cup joint. So you kind of get an idea of what you're working with, like retainers there. So the honest truth here is if you kind of screw with this, you run a risk of breaking it, and then you got to do a whole nother thing to do a thing. So we're gonna need a 12 millimeter. Get back there. There we go. Just gonna run these out with my impact. Be careful not to drop the bolts. Just move that shift cable out of the way. Bolts back in your holes. If you have a problem with remembering where things go, I tell my son all the time, I'm just like, stick a bolt back in the hole. It's not a big deal. Now we gotta take that shift selector bolt right there out. It should be a 12 millimeter, and we can just pop it loose. There we go. Nice and easy. Now, we can get the torque spec for this later because we can replace this part. We should just be able to wiggle that guy off of there. Shouldn't really need a pry tool, but if you do, just be gentle. There you go. Easy peasy. Now, there's a lock nut that's down on there. You can kind of see it right in there. See if I can zoom in on it for you. So on this lock nut, there are 3 tabs. There's one there, one there, one there. There shouldn't be much torque on this. If there is any, give it a little bit of lubrication and then hit it with a crescent wrench and it should come right off. But let's... Now, if you're worried about anything not going back in the right spot, you can 100% index this. It's not a big deal. There we go. Perfect. Easy peasy. Alright, and take that nut. Alright, now that we got both of those off there, we need to take these 2 10 millimeter bolts loose. Or index ring. Give them a little, call it, bloop bloop. Thing, washer. Looks just like that guy right there. Make sure you guys can see it. Yep, that thing. Needs to come off, and we're just going to stick that in our tray. Yeah, there wasn't much holding them on at all. If I had to guess, maybe 10, 12 Newton meters, maybe 18. All right. The thing about hand tools is that you can kind of get an idea of how tight they are. So when you go to put them back together, things are a lot easier. Because here, we don't all got fancy tools. We don't all have impacts or torque bars. And since those are marked, we'll know where they came from. But as a DIYer, you might not have a lot of tools. So doing things by hand and with hand tools and not going straight to your impact tools that you have because of your contracting day job or your maintenance job or your being an electrician or your whatever, really gives you an idea of how tight is tight and how tight is too tight and how tight is too loose. It's something you should consider. There was a long time in my life where I did not have, you know, I'll be frank, I got a very bougie set of torque bars. They're about $2,500 worth. Over the years, not bragging, but I've bought a lot of them. I'm not a fan of mechanical torque bars, the little clicky ones, especially when you get down into the really tiny measurements. Like if you have a clicking torque bar, just as a food for thought, only use the middle of it. Like if you get below the bottom 20% or you're above that top, like the top 20% of that torque bar, it's probably time to get the next size up or the next size down because you're really not being efficient with it. That's enough ranting. Let's get this piece off of here. It's pretty straightforward. Just give it a little bit of wiggle and shimmy and it should slide straight up and off of there. Take your time, go slow, and there's no rush here. No rush. Not a good idea to take a pry tool to this, and if you do, once again, there you go. You run the risk of damaging something. But easy peasy. Don't worry about the oil that's right there. A lot of that is poolage from other things leaking around here. Now that we got a shift selector, you can really kind of see what's going on down in there, what we're working with and where things are. Well, let's get this cover off. You're gonna need, I believe there's 4 T25s in this cover here. Pretty easy to see, they're right there, 1, 2, 3, 4. We need to remove that bracket right there, and there should be 2 T30s, one on the bottom way down underneath there. You're not gonna really be able to see it. One right there, and then one 10 millimeter right above it. Those need to come out. And then we've got a couple more bolts around the outside there. Yeah, let's get the cover off, and then let's get the bracket off, then we'll take the cover off. That's a really easy one to lose. It's kind of short. I'm just gonna put that up in our tray. Now that those 3 bolts are out of there, we can move that harness out of the way. Something that we need to take care of real quick. There's a vacuum line right down here. You need to slide that off. This little grommet on the inside sometimes will get stuck on there, so just something to think of. You might need that. Anyway, almost forgot. Be careful not to break it. That thing goes right up to the firewall there, so if you want to remove it all the way, you can, but it's really not needed. You can just slide it out of the way. But as they get older, plastic likes to get brittle and things do like to break, so just be mindful. All right, let's get these 4 T25s loose here. Sorry, T20s. Once I get all these nice and loose, go ahead and buzz them off with the ratchet real quick. Now, if you're doing a rebuild on your vacuum pump, you need to be careful not to lose these. They are kind of small little guys. If you're not doing a rebuild and you're just replacing them, I mean, still be careful, don't lose it. It's not as bad, I guess. Should have probably warned you. Now's the time if you don't got towels. Probably put some towels down. You're definitely gonna have some oil that's coming out of here. This is also one of the #1 places that leak on a Volkswagen. If you ever got a rear main seal you think it's leaking, nah, check your vacuum pump first. Odds are it very well could be leaking. This cover may or may not stay on there, but we can go ahead and pop it off because it's gonna have to come off anyways. So, there we go. All right, and that is our cover. We're just gonna set this guy off to the side for right now. Everything that's down inside there, you can leave it there. It's not that big a deal. It's not gonna harm anything. But what we need to do is now get to the other 3 Torx bolts. One of them is right here. There's another one on the bottom down here, and you're not gonna be able to see it, but you should be able to feel it. I think I've already got all 3 of them out. I'm a goof. All right, so we should just be able to rock this. There we go. Now, typically at this point, you can't slide this thing out, and you can't get it to go forward with that. But without that cover on there, we can literally flip it over on top of the shaft and rotate it right out. And there you go. That is how you remove the vacuum pump without having to remove the transmission. You're welcome. That's the trick right there. We're just gonna stick that off to the side for now. Let me get myself cleaned up and get that surface cleaned up, and we'll keep moving forward. All right, so in order to get this new pump ready to go back in, we need to take out the bolts for this cover here. I'm just gonna use an impact on them. You can use a hand tool if you want, but just be mindful. We gently just pry this cover right off. And something that we want to be mindful of is this seal. When we go to reinstall this pump, we want to make sure that this seal is installed properly before we install this cover. Otherwise, we could cause a bigger problem than what we had originally. So now that we got this all off and ready, let's take it back to the car. So we need to kind of be mindful of a couple things. First off, the gear that's on the back of here, we need to get it lined up with the gear that's in there. So kind of orienting it in the right direction to start with is definitely going to help. Also, we need to go back in the same order that we came out. So we're going to set this down onto the shift selector and roll it around, and you'll see. Well, let's just get to it. All right, so make sure our gasket's on. Now the insides might try to come out on us, so there we go. It's kind of a weird thing to do here, but get it done. Boogers. There we go. Our gear. Yep, there it is. Nice. Hopefully one of these cameras is getting a good angle on the dangle here. So I like to start with just putting a couple of the bolts back in their holes. Make sure to get your gasket lined up. That is a big deal on these. If it's not lined up, things are going to get interesting. I can just run that guy in a little bit by hand. And then we should Gotta get this front one in here. So we got the one in here, the one in here. What I like to do, just to make sure everything is kind of copacetic, we're just gonna kind of just snug things up a little bit by hand there and right down there. Now, we're gonna have to take this upper bolt back out to put the bracket on, but for right now, what I'm wanting to do is I want to go ahead and put this cover back on, and we'll take the bolt out here in a second. But just to be like mindful of everything that's going on, we're gonna go ahead and put the cover on. Make sure our gasket is all good, and we can go ahead and screw these guys back in. Now, I could not find an actual torque spec on this because technically you're not supposed to be doing this. Like, according to the manufacturer, we should not be taking this thing out and apart. So, these didn't have a lot on the other one when we took them off. I'm gonna set these by hand, but just to kind of baseline them, we're gonna put them in with a torque bar and see where they're at. Kind of a reference, I guess. And I got a torque bar here set to 9 Newton meters, and we're just gonna kind of feel it out and see what it feels like. I mean, it feels pretty good. And we're gonna go a little bit more. That was 12. 12 seems kind of tight. Yeah. Yeah, somewhere between 9 and 12 Newton meters. That one was 11.25. If I was a betting man, based on the size of the bolt, what feels by like the hand torque gauge versus what the digi says, yeah, 9 to 12, no mas, no more. I think that's pretty good. We'll go ahead and paint mark those since we knew we took them out. And we messed with them. So do our little due diligence here. Blam, 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 blam. All right, so now we got to get this bracket back in that we took off earlier because 2 of the bolts go through there and into there. But this thing is freaking nasty. It's bugging the crap out of me. So we're just gonna go ahead and pop it off. And I don't have the sonic cleaner going right now, so we're just gonna give this a little brake clean bath. Much nicer. Okay, so now we can put the bracket back down in there. The lower bolt and the upper bolt both go through this bracket, so that's why we put the side bolts in, just because I want to get that cover in there. But now that we got those in, I'm gonna loosen these 2 bolts, slide this cover in, and we're gonna get the top bolt back in its hole, get the bottom bolt in its hole, and then we can tighten them all back up so that we know everything is lined up, gasket, etc., etc. So, let's do it good. So before I torque these down, I'm gonna go ahead and put that 10 millimeter back in. And that was that one that just sat there right on the top. It's kind of a little short guy, so try not to drop it. Unlike the cover bolts that we're not technically supposed to remove, I do know the torque spec for the vacuum pump housing, and that is 10 Newton meters. So let's get this guy torqued up. He's all down. We got all that in there. Go ahead and set our wiring harness up into our connector. Lock it back in. Almost forgot. Put our vacuum pump line back on. If that grommet's not in there, it won't fit on there tightly. It's supposed to fit on snug. But we're gonna pull the cameras out of here, clean this area all up. This guy had a broken connector here. I'm gonna deal with that for him. I think at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the cameras out, and we're just gonna get this area cleaned up. It's not necessary that you clean things. So kind of like for future you, or future me in this case, you know, it's nice to know, to look back on things and be like, oh, okay, cool, that's not the problem. But when you have old grimy oil and gunk left there, it's really difficult to know, hey, is that from this time, or is this something new, or what it is. And it's just good to clean up behind yourself. Leave things better than what you got. Leave things better than how you found them. That's a Boy Scout motto also. Funny how it works here. Anyway, let's get this stuff cleaned up. Got everything all nice and cleaned up. No, we just need to put the stack back together. So slide our controller, slide our shift selector back down on there. Got our bolts here. I like to start with my 10 millimeter bolts and put those back in first. So since we have our paint on there, what we need to do here, we need to line up our paint marks with our bolts. Tighten these up. Remember this little guy? We need to put this guy back on there. So, I need to slide the little finger thing back down over it. It should only go on one direction if we did everything right. Put that down on there. All right, and now we need to put that nut on there from earlier. I remember this nut was basically hand tight. Didn't need any special tools to take it off. All right, that's about as tight as I can get it by hand. I like to just take a little flathead screwdriver. And I can bend those tabs right back up there. I'm gonna make sure to get those guys back up in there. It keeps that nut backing off. Kind of push them each in the middle. Now we got that off. Let's get our arm on there. Our lock washer. And then last but not least, our nut. Some of the things that we do sometimes don't always have torque specs involved because they're kind of thinking outside the box, right? Manufacturers did not want things to be done a certain way. And when they built them a certain way with not service in mind, but put it in a square package or put it inside this package. I'll be honest, I've been trying to quit smoking and I do these like daily life hacks, and in the life hack, one of them, first of the year, was suck on vitamin C drops. Not even kidding. You can go back and watch my shorts on it. Anyway, so some of these things don't have torque specs, and well, because they don't have torque specs, I like to go about torquing some of these bolts down using a torque bar and kind of feeling out what the hand torque wrench when, like taking things apart. That said, I could have taken the torque bar apart, could have taken this apart using the torque bar and kind of gotten myself in a idea of where it is, but breakaway is different than torque down, so yeah, if you want to fight me on it, get in the comments section. Let me know your thoughts. Is breakaway different than torque down? Like torque down, torque to do? I don't know. Impact guns, our impact guns have different breakaways than here nor there. I digress. Let's just measure this thing, see what happens, and we'll stop. We'll stop whenever it feels good and tight, but I got the torque gauge set to 10 Newton meters. So we'll see what happens. Seems to be just fine. I would say 10 Newton meters on that guy is probably about the most I would do. I don't think I would do much more than that. When in doubt, throttle out? No. Just for safety's sakes, we'll mark it. If you ever have any concerns or worry, you can go back in and check it later, but I think 10 Newton meters is probably pretty safe. Same thing here after you get these guys in, 10 Newton meters on them, that's probably pretty good. They're only an M6 125 bolt in an M10, so frankly, I think it snaps at like 22 something. I don't know, one day we might have to do that. That's another one of those. Let me know if that would be something you guys would like to see a video on. Like we just go around and break a whole bunch of bolts and see where they break at. Like I've got a torque bar in here that measures 350 foot-pounds plus it can measure 360 degrees if we put it in degree mode. So we can do some damage to some shit. Yeah, let's get this bracket back on. We need to take these two bolts right here out. All right. And then we can put our shift cable back down. Now this back one, when you're tightening it down, you want to be a little careful with it. There's a real chance of breaking your vacuum booster line, and you don't want to do that. These two guys back here, I wouldn't be as concerned about spec on them. Just a couple ugga-duggas. They're good. They ain't coming out. We got that on. We can go ahead. Linkage back on. Now remember, if you have problems with this, you can lubricate it, but usually they'd go back down pretty easily. All right. Since we didn't touch our connector, we don't got to worry about that. If you removed any connectors or let's go ahead, get the battery tray back in, and I've noticed this guy earlier was kind of broken. We're gonna grab the plastic welder and see if we can mend that outside there for him, just so he doesn't have to replace that entire hose that runs all the way down there. PCM, our pump back on. There's little bitty grooves in there, and you gotta have the big ones on the outside, the little one on the outside, and it all just works. It kind of acts like a locking mechanism. Technically, they're all the same part number though. If you ever needed to replace one, all the grommets are the same. Positive first, then the negative. Yep. There we go. And there we go. We are all back together. If you've gotten to this point in the video, congratulations. You will have 100% successfully installed your vacuum pump on your 2.5 liter Volkswagen Jetta, Passat, Beetle, etc., etc., etc. It wasn't that bad. You did it without taking the transmission out, and we got to clean up probably something on our engine that was really gunky and grimy. And overall, you saved probably about $1,000. If you guys like this video, I'm not gonna hold you any longer. Smash that like button. If it helped you solve your problem that you were having, smash that like button. And if you wanna see more stuff similar to this, guys, consider subscribing to the channel. Like I said before, this is all we do every day, day in, day out. If there's any questions, concerns, or you're another technician and know a spec or see something that I might have missed, please get down in the comment section, let me know. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace. I'm Audi.